everyone, I'm Chelsey White of Chelsweets, and I'm here today to show you how to make this chocolate-covered strawberry cake. So I've made a miniature version of it, just to show you guys a sneak peek of what it's going to look like. But we're going to decorate the real-size cake a little bit differently. So we're going to be doing a partial drip cake. So I'm going to go ahead and set this baby cake aside, and we'll go ahead and start decorating our cake. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a dab of buttercream, and I'm going to go ahead and place it in the center of our cake. And this is important because it helps secure your cake layers to your cake base. So I have here my favorite chocolate layer cake that I've made, and I'm going to set it down on my cardboard cake ground. So all the recipes today for my cake base and for my buttercream are up on Chelsweets.com. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and check out Chelsweets.com and you can find everything that you're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead now and start frosting our cake layers. And also, if you guys have any questions about this cake or baking or anything else, feel free to ask. I'd love to answer your questions while I'm decorating. So this here is an American buttercream that I have flavored with some strawberry puree that I reduced down by cooking it on a low heat for about 20 minutes. However, if you don't like American buttercream or you prefer Swiss meringue or some other buttercream, you can definitely use that. Any buttercream would work for this cake. So as I'm decorating, I just want to make sure I get a nice even layer of frosting as I do this. And I'm just going to go ahead and spin it around before I add on my next layer. And also between each of our layers, we're going to add some miniature chocolate chips. And this is just going to help give it a little bit of texture when you bite into it. We're just going to sprinkle these around. And if you can't find miniature chocolate chips, you could always chop up bits of chocolate or even chop up regular chocolate chips. I like to have smaller pieces of chocolate just because if it's too big, it can kind of like dominate the bite. So, but that's just my preference. So now that we have those on there, I'm going to go ahead and add my next cake layer. And this is going to be a 4-layer cake. So I like to make my cakes really tall. I just think it looks best and I love the way it looks when you cut into it. But if you prefer a shorter cake or you don't need to feed that many people, you can definitely make a 2-layer cake or just make a smaller version of this cake. So it's all about your preference. Any questions out there?
So how do you get your perfect consistency for that buttercream, and how do you make that buttercream?
So this is an American buttercream, so it's really easy to make. It's just butter, powdered sugar, vanilla, a little bit of heavy cream, salt, and then a strawberry puree. And it's really important when you add any flavoring to American buttercream that it's not too thin, because it has so much butter in it. You really need to make sure that there's not too much water in the puree, or it can totally throw off the consistency and break the buttercream. So I actually have the full recipe for that buttercream up on Chelsweets.com. So if you want to know how to make it, you can go there, and it's explained in depth. And the other question was about the consistency of my frosting. And I get my buttercream nice and smooth by mixing it with a paddle attachment, and that helps not incorporate too much air into it. And I also like to kind of slowly swirl it around with a spatula before I frost, just to make sure any extra air is removed as well. Any other questions?
How do you know how much buttercream to make?
That is an age-old question. So for a standard 4-layer cake, I usually make 1 to 1.5 batches of buttercream, depending on if I'm doing extra decorations. If you're just applying a layer of frosting and you're not going to be adding any other decorations with frosting, I think that's probably enough. But if you're going to do anything like buttercream roses or ruffles or something like that, you might want to make a batch and a half.
And what does the salt do in buttercream?
So when you make the buttercream, you usually use unsalted butter because you want to be able to control how much butter you're putting into the frosting to make sure you get the taste right. So you do need a little bit of salt in there to help cut the sweetness, but by adding it yourself and not using salted butter, you can easily control what the taste is like. So.
And how do you keep the buttercream from not melting?
I guess my cake layers are chilled, which helps, and also your buttercream should be pretty stiff. You know, you're not adding very much heavy cream to it, so hopefully your buttercream is not melting in the first place, and if your cake layers are cooled, it should be able to keep its consistency just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and smooth this out now. We're almost adding our last layer. So I'm going to add a little bit more chocolate, and then we'll get going frosting the exterior of the cake.
Someone asked where your recipes are available.
So you guys, if you're just tuning in and you want to know where to find the recipe for this cake, all of them are up on Chelsweets.com, including the exact recipe for this frosting and cake base. And also, if you want to see any more of my tutorials, you can also visit my YouTube channel, which is called Chelsweets Bakery. So, and again, that's Chelsweets, Chelsweets. I know sometimes when I say it, I swallow my words, so. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and add on our last layer, and I like to flip it upside down. And that's just because you know that the base is always flat because the baked against the pan, so it's easier to get nice sharp sides when you flip it over. So I'm going to go ahead and press down just like always to make sure there's no air bubbles in between. And we're going to go ahead and set these aside.
For people who are just joining, what are you making tonight?
You guys, so tonight I am making a chocolate covered strawberry drip cake. So it's going to be really fun. We're definitely going to dip some strawberries in a minute, but first we're going to finish covering our chocolate cake with some fresh strawberry buttercream. So another fun variation you can do for this cake would be to make strawberry cake layers and use a chocolate buttercream. It really is all about your preference. I thought that the strawberry frosting is a really beautiful shade, so I wanted to do it this way, but I also think a strawberry cake would be great too. So I'm going to go ahead and add a lot of frosting to the top here, and I'm going to kind of work my way down as I smooth. And if you don't like this much frosting, I have a huge sweet tooth, so I like a lot. You could always make this a naked cake, or you could just use, make a thinner layer of buttercream between each layer. It's all about your preference. So I'm going to go ahead and smooth this out, and then I'm going to work my way down the sides. So I kind of use the bit that's hanging over the edge to just smooth around as I go. And I'm smoothing with an offset spatula. It's a large offset spatula. And it makes the process a whole lot easier. So if you don't have one and you really enjoy cake decorating, I highly recommend getting one. Any other questions out there?
Someone asked, what's the best way to store leftover cake?
So I think that it depends kind of like if you've cut into the cake. I assume you have, I like to usually put mine in a giant Tupperware container that's airtight. If you can't do that though, you can always put some saran wrap over the area that's cut. It's probably the best way. Or you can always cut off the bit that's exposed once you are eating it down the road to make sure that you have nice and fresh cake. Any other questions?
A lot of people are excited to see you cut into it. It's very high.
I know, it's really tall. And again, you guys, if you're not down for this tall of a cake, you can always just make a 2-layer version of this. So it's all about your preference. And also, a lot of people are always like, how on earth would someone eat a whole slice? Is that many layers? But when I serve cakes that are this tall, I usually cut the slices in half. So don't worry, we're not eating that massive of a slice.
Yes, someone asked how many servings this cake is.
I always wonder about that because it really depends on like who you're feeding and how hungry they are / how much they like cake. I would say this would probably feed at least probably 12 to 16. But if you're with a lot of people that don't eat very much or don't have a really big sweet tooth, it probably could feed almost up to 20, I would say.
And how long can you freeze the cake for, would you say?
Freeze the cake once it's made, or I don't know. I've never really left one in the freezer / fridge for very long. But when you do seal it with buttercream, it really locks in all the moisture. So I think that I would say several days. But eating it fresh is always best. All right. So now that we have a nice thick layer of buttercream here, I think that it's about time that we smooth it with our bench scraper. I'm gonna go ahead and just make sure that I worked it all the way up to the top, and then we'll get to smoothing. Great. Add a little bit more where I see some cake exposed. Perfect. All right, so now I always like to use a bench scraper to smooth it out. And this just helps you get some nice smooth sides and sharp edges. So I like to kind of just spin around and drag the frosting around the cake until it's nice and smooth. So I try to apply an even amount of pressure here with my cake bench and just kind of pull the frosting around gently. So since this is a live stream, you know, it's always the best practice to apply a crumb coat and then apply a second layer of frosting. But in the interest of time tonight, we're just going to do 1 layer of frosting, so bear with me. But if you really want perfectly smooth sides, I highly recommend applying a crumb coat and then adding a second layer. That is how you get those perfectly smooth sides. So now that we've smoothed the sides, we're going to go ahead and smooth the top just by dragging in towards the center with our cake bench. I always call it a cake bench with our bench scraper. I think I literally made that name up, but it's because I only use this for cakes. Any other questions out there?
Someone wants to know how you use fondant and how you place it on properly without cracking it.
So fondant is interesting. So it's really delicate and temperamental, and I actually don't work with it very much because I really prefer to work with buttercream frosting. So, I mean, it really depends on making sure you have the right temperature and that your fondant is properly warmed up, that you've kneaded it enough to have it be the right texture. So it's it's very complicated. Okay guys, so now that we have smoothed the top, I'm going to go around one more time just to make sure that we really have a nice sharp corners. We'll drag these in one more time. And then we're going to get going on our chocolate ganache, which is going to be the really fun part.
For people joining late, can you just remind them what you're making tonight?
Of course. So tonight I'm making a chocolate-covered strawberry drip cake. So we're just about to get to the drips. We have frosted 4 layers of chocolate cake with a fresh strawberry buttercream. So I'm already excited to cut into this. We have a few more steps and a bit more decorating before we can do that. So I'm going to go ahead and scrape off the excess buttercream around my cake base just by applying some pressure with the edge of my bench scraper. And before I pop this into the freezer to chill really quickly, I'm going to go ahead and add some freeze-dried strawberries around the base. And you also can add fresh strawberries here, but sometimes all the water in fresh strawberries can kind of like run off onto your cake base. So just to be safe, I'm going to use freeze-dried strawberries because I think they kind of have the same effect. And they also have such a concentrated flavor, and they're going to add a great texture when you bite into them. So we're just going to add these around the base, and then we will pop this into the freezer. So after we have added these around, we're going to go ahead and get going on our chocolate ganache, and we're going to dip these fresh strawberries into it. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Another fun thing you could do if you're using fresh strawberries around the base is to cut them into the shape of a heart, which I've done before. And that is a really fun look as well. And also, if you really love strawberries, you could add strawberries to the inside of the cake too, in between the layers. So there's a ton of different things you could do with this. You could really take this a lot of different directions. So don't feel limited by what I am doing. You can definitely get creative with this idea. So we're almost done here. I'm just going to keep going around.
You have viewers from all over the world. You can say hi to people in the Philippines and Jamaica, Nebraska, Illinois.
Hello everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight. If you're enjoying this tutorial and you want to see more of my cakes, you can also follow me on Instagram at Chelsweets. And again, that's CHELSWEETS. Alright, so we're going to add one more little strawberry there. And now that we have the base on, we're going to go ahead and pop this into the freezer really quickly. And then we're going to get going on the chocolate ganache. Alright, so I'm going to show you guys quickly how to make the chocolate ganache. I've already prepared some ahead of time that we're going to use for our drizzles, but we also want some fresh chocolate ganache so we can dip our strawberries into it. So in order to do that, I have measured out a half a cup of miniature chocolate chips, and to that we're going to be adding a half a cup of heavy cream. So I'm going to go ahead and pour that out now. So it's basically just equal parts heavy cream and chocolate. And if you want to see the recipe for this, it's also up on Chelsweets.com. And I actually have a full tutorial as well up on my YouTube channel, which is called Chelsweets Bakery. So we're just going to swirl this around to make sure that all of the chocolate chips are submerged. And we're going to go ahead and pop this into the microwave for about 40 seconds, I would say. So this is a super easy process. It's not hard at all. It's going to, once it's fully melted and we've stirred it, everything is incorporated. We're going to go ahead and dip our strawberries into it. So once they're all nice and warm, we're going to add them to our cake. And then we're going to add on the extra drip. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Just have to wait and be patient for our ganache to heat up. Does anyone have any questions about the ganache or the process?
What inspires you to make all of these cakes, and what was your inspiration for this one?
Well, a lot of different things inspire me. I would say just like things in life and things that people like. My favorite thing is to make cakes for people's birthdays, so I'm always, making it about their favorite thing. So if someone really loves a certain kind of cookie or peanut butter or anything like that, I would say that's my main inspiration. And the inspiration for today's cake is driven by the warm weather that we've been having. So despite the torrential downpour that we had in New York City today, in general it's been getting warmer and I feel like summer's around the corner. So I wanted to make a cake that had some fresh fruit in it, and that's why we went for the chocolate dipped strawberry cake. Alright, so it's important that you do this in a heat-proof bowl, just because the cream vacuum, you can see it's steaming, and it does get pretty warm. So you don't want it to be, you don't want to use a plastic bowl that can be temperamental. So we're going to go ahead and stir this together gently though, because our cream is very warm. And at first it's going to look a little bit broken, and it's not going to look like it's incorporating. We just have to be patient and keep stirring slowly. So we're going to keep doing that now. And it's starting to come together. So if you're doing this at home, just remember to gently stir until you start to see the mixture come together. It will darken in the center, and then you can start to stir a little bit more vigorously. So we're going to go ahead and keep going here. So that is looking good. Any other questions?
We're getting a lot of birthday requests.
So I don't actually, FYI everyone, I don't accept actual cake orders. I only make cakes for my very close friends and family. So, sorry. But if you're one of my good friends, then you can get a cake. Alright, you guys, so you can see that our ganache has come together now. It's a nice, dark, beautiful color. And that's exactly what we're looking for. And you can see that all of our chocolate bits are melted. So that's fantastic. We're going to go ahead and set that aside, and we're going to keep stirring it occasionally just to help it cool off a little faster. And this time has allowed our cake to go ahead and chill in the freezer, so I'm going to grab it out now. And it's really important that you let your cake chill, because if you're going to be adding warm ganache to it, if it's not chilled, the buttercream is just going to run everywhere. So it's very important when using ganache to make sure that your cake is nice and cold to the touch. Okay. So you can see it's nice and firm now, which is exactly what we're after. And this is going to be the fun part. So I'm going to go ahead and move the cake a little bit closer to you guys. And I'm going to take my ganache here, and we're going to go ahead and dip our strawberries into our ganache, and we're then going to place them all on the cake. So it's going to kind of pool around there and start to drip off the edge. And that's what we're after. So I'm going to go ahead and use an acetate sheet to hold underneath the strawberry to make sure that the drips don't go everywhere. But we're going to go ahead and dip it, and then catch any excess drips, and then we're going to nestle it right on the edge just like that. So we're going to do this all the way around the cake, and we're going to leave some space, and then we're going to add on some extra drips to really make it look like that ganache is running off. So make sure that when you're doing this that you have washed your strawberries. It's very important. And that you're using nice and fresh strawberries. Let me go ahead and set this one right there. So if our cake wasn't chilled, these strawberries would be sliding off, and the ganache would just be melting all over the cake. So we do want the drips to go, but we do want it to be a little bit controlled. So that looks just about perfect. So we're going to keep going around the cake here. And again, we're going to leave a space in between the strawberries because we're going to be adding some buttercream swirls at the end. So let's keep going around. Any other questions out there as I'm doing this?
How do you prevent large chunks or pieces in your drip?
I guess just making sure that your chocolate is fully melted. And if it's not, you can always heat it up a little bit longer. And again, the trick to get, the trick and tip, I'm like combining those words, to getting good drips is making sure that your ganache is the right temperature and that your cake is fully chilled. So, your ganache will be much thinner and will run further. I'm gonna go ahead and spin the cake a little. Will run further if it's warmer, and it's not going to be as fluid if it's cold or not quite as warm. So it's important that you make sure that your cake is chilled, that your ganache is the right temperature, and also that you're using the right ratio of cream to chocolate. So, and I guess making sure that all of your chocolate is fully melted in your ganache. So, alright, so we're going to have room for one more strawberry, and then we're going to add on some more drips. Perfect. Great. So those are nicely spaced. I'm going to go ahead and set this down. And I'm going to go ahead now and take some ganache that I have heated but then also let cool, so it's not, this is very thin right now, so it would just run straight down the cake, as you can see. And this is a little bit thicker since it's not quite as warm. So I'm going to go ahead and just go around and just add some drips around the strawberry, just to make it look really dramatic. And where we already have drips, we can just add a little bit more. So again, this is a partial drip technique. If you want to put chocolate drips all around the cake, you totally can. That's a great option as well. I'm going to slide this one back a little. It's running away. So add a little bit more here. I just make a lot of full drip cakes, so I wanted to do something a little bit different tonight with you guys. I also have a full tutorial on all the tips and tricks of how to get perfect drips on your cake. So if you're curious or have had any trouble with it, you can definitely check that out on my YouTube channel, which is called Chelsweets Bakery. Alright you guys, so now that we have all of our drips on, cake looks pretty good. We have one more step before we cut into this, and that is piping on some buttercream swirls. So I have here strawberry buttercream that I put in a piping bag with a Wilton 1M tip, and we're going to go ahead and pipe on some swirls in between. However, if you're a cake minimalist and you don't want to add that, you can probably just leave it the way it is right now. I just always think that cakes need more frosting, so we're going to add a little bit more here before we cut in. I'm so excited to cut into this. Taking all my self-control to wait. Great. So now that all of those are on, you guys, I think that we can cut into this cake. So I'm going to go ahead and slide over my frosting and all my other spools. And I'm going to get out my plates. And we're going to slice into this. So since this is a very tall cake, I have a massive knife that I'm going to use to cut into it. And it's always best practice if you want to get nice clean cuts to heat up your knife ahead of time. And you can do that just by dipping in hot water. I'm not going to do that right now because I don't want to run hot water and waste your time. But I think our cake is ready to be cut, so we're going to go ahead and dive right in. This is the moment of truth.
We're excited.
Cutting through that freeze-dried strawberry startled me. Alright, you guys, get ready. Woo. So there we have it, you guys. We have our chocolate cake with our chocolate chips in between and our fresh strawberry buttercream. I'm going to go ahead and set this down now. Eek. Paper towel on there. So we'll lay that right there. Gently lay our knife out. And just to give you one more sneak peek before we cut and of the cross section. So I hope you guys enjoyed this cake as much as I did. Again, this was a chocolate covered strawberry partial drip cake. And I'm Chelsey White of Chelsweets. And if you enjoyed this, you can definitely check out more of my cakes on Instagram at Chelsweets, which is CHELSWEETS. I also have a YouTube channel called Chelsweets Bakery. And again, the recipe for this is up on Chelsweets.com. So I live stream every Wednesday. So if you enjoyed this, you can tune in next week around 7:45 and you can see what I'm up to then. I'll see you guys later. Have a great night.